Russ, welcome back. Today's a very interesting subject. We're talking about training intensity. How hard exactly should we train? There are a whole range of approaches to it, and some work better for others. For example, speaking to many of Salsai's contemporaries, when he was a young man, he really could train with the perspective of train harder tomorrow than I did yesterday. But not many people could do that. And they would, one gentleman I spoke to, they would go to the mountains for 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time to train. And the intensity was such that pretty well everyone else was gone. They burned out after 3 days. But Salsai would just maintain that metronome like rhythm from morning till night, day after day, week after week. And there's not many people can do that. But there is a good formula that we want to discuss briefly today. And I think this one concept, this one formula will literally transform the way you train for the rest of your life. And I'm not exaggerating. And that is the concept of the importance of training today so that tomorrow's training session can be the best it can be. I think it's very easy to lose sight of how hard we should train, and a little bit of braggadocio or macho or ego always tells us that we need to train harder and harder and harder and harder. And we don't really consider tomorrow. We train hard today with nothing but today
in mind.
So when I say train today so that tomorrow's training is the best it can be, that's literally paraphrasing Mitch's training mentor and coach, Ian King. If you're not familiar with Ian King, get familiar with Ian King. I think he's one of the most innovative athletic development, strength and conditioning and conditioning coaches in the world today.
I think so, definitely.
Definitely. Now, his exact words were, and I quote, "The goal of a training session should be to do the amount that will result in the best improvement into the next workout of the same kind." Isn't that interesting? Of the same kind.
That's key.
Very important. Not to do as much as one can. The underlying deciding factor in how much to do in each workout should be found in the answer to the question, what amount done today will give me the best improvement into the next session? That's pretty profound.
Sure.
Can you elaborate on that with your experience with Ian King?
Yeah, absolutely. It essentially means exactly that. Periodization simply means to plan. That's all it means. It's a big fancy word, and it means to plan. And there's a saying that often the people will overestimate what they can achieve in a short period of time and underestimate what they can achieve in a long period of time. So what Ian's saying there is micro steps. Be very particular about what you're about to do this session, next session, next session. And a good example to use is something like strength training. You might be doing a program, and let's say it's got 3 or 4 sets of each exercise to do, but don't do that the first week. Do 1 set. See what effect. For some things you might be under training,
underwhelm yourself.
Exactly. And other things it might be too much. And once you've adapted to it, then add a 2nd set. When you've adapted that, add a 3rd set.
The problem with that is the ego when it says, I have a plan, I need to stick to it. But when you think in terms of train today so that tomorrow's training is the best it can be, it makes so much more sense. I think it's very important. Even Salsai spoke very much so in his book. This is one version of it, the Kyokushin way. And he spoke about the importance of doing things like keeping records, training over long periods of time with consistency. People don't keep records, but it's very important to do so because you need to know what you are doing from day to day, week to week, month to month, if you're going to get a solid training plan in place.
Also, yeah, the shortest pencil is better than the longest memory. Is a great quote. And the most important book you'll ever read on training is your own training diary. And I've forgotten the researcher's name. It's people laugh at me. It's Schmilter-Bilter, or it's a German gentleman who was a legend in the 80s, 90s training research that he did.
Don't look up Schmilter-Bilter.
Yeah,
we know that's not it.
It's a long name that starts with S. I actually feel awkward not knowing the name properly. But he basically talked about recording your training units is the single most important thing you can do in training. And recording of the training units are the sessions you do and what you do within those training sessions. And they tell you so much over a long period of time. It's not even funny. And you actually, Shihan, have a great training diary.
Yes, I really encourage people to keep a diary. The diary is not just based on the intensity of your strength and conditioning, your physical training. It's also based on the skill development,
technical training,
and also in terms of applying your technique in kumite. So I have a thing called K350 and another one called T250. K350 simply means 350 rounds of kumite, and you break them up into 7 zones of 50 rounds each. And each of those zones, you're focusing on one particular thing. You're just doing normal kumite, but your focus in zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 changes over time. When you finish the 7, you can go back to the start, or when you get a new grade, maybe you've just graded for green belt, go back to the start of K350. When you get your black belt, when you're preparing for a grading, when you're preparing for a tournament, any time that you have the need to plan your training very well, the K350 works well. The T250 is different. That's for grappling. T stands for taps. 5 times 50. You're focusing on one particular area of your training for 50 taps. It may take a month. It may take 3 months. It doesn't matter. The point of it is that by keeping a record, you know where you are in terms of your skill and physical development. And Ian King's, the paraphrase I use, train today so that tomorrow's training is the best training it can be, makes so much sense.
It does. And it really ties in with what you say, Shihan. There's that great saying as well. You're only as good as your last training session, which we all know is not true. You're only as good as this morning's training session is something that you say. And there's a lot of wisdom in that, not just for training consistently, but also it points out very clearly, we should have all trained this morning.
Yes.
And here's the key. Even if you don't have a whole bunch of time, even if you're, got multiple commitments, blah, 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 whatever the excuses are, because all excuses are equal, undertrain the physical qualities. Just do a little bit, do a tiny bit, undertrain these things. And this is how you drop the ego and keep improving over time. And I think there's so much wisdom in what you say.
The same thing holds for things like meditation. I mean, if you're serious about meditation, you speak to people who have a very deep meditation lifestyle, they can be meditating hours and hours a day. So you think, if I want to get into meditation, well, I can't sit still for 3 hours. It doesn't matter. You don't have to. Sit still for an hour. If you can't do an hour, half an hour. If you can't do half an hour, 15 minutes. If you can't do 15 minutes, 10 minutes. If you can't do 10 minutes, 5 minutes. If you can't do 5 minutes, you got problems. But where you can start is with a single breath. You got to start to establish the habit. If you can't find a little bit of time every day to stretch, for example, well, then something's fishy. And it doesn't have to be an hour session where you have a shower, get changed, get in your car, driving out of the gym, find your space in the gym, settle down, have your protein shake, and then have a shower. You're turning a 10, 15-minute session into 4 hours. Don't worry about that. Just do something. And I think that's the key. Train today so that tomorrow's training is the best it can be. If you don't do anything today, clearly tomorrow's training session has been shortchanged. Okay. If you overwhelm yourself today so that you can't recover, the flip side is also true. But the important thing to remember is just get into a habit. Remember, there's only 3 things you need. Only 3 things you need for mastery in anything. You need regular training, consistent training. The difference between regular training and consistent training, regular training is frequency, consistent training is intensity. You have to maintain a good intensity over time, and that is where the variations come in over a long period of time. Regular, consistent training over a long period of time will give you mastery. Now, injury.
Yeah.
What causes injury?
So many things, but overtraining and doing too much, repetitive activities are the same things, poor sleep, poor nutrition, poor training balance, so many things. But something, again, that Ian talks about a lot, he says to his clients and athletes is, if we do nothing else other than keep you injury free and on the field, we've won. And that's a really important point. Again, it's another point that goes so unnoticed because everyone wants to talk about, I shouldn't say everyone, but it's common to talk about. For example, right now, David Goggins is really popular in the world today for the incredible endurance feats that he does. But that's so out of touch for most people that we don't need to go that far with doing things. We just need to do what we can do with the time that we have. And if you can continue skill development, keep training regularly, where you don't get injured, you stay on the mat, you stay on the dojo, you stay on the field, whatever your sport or activity is, that alone is an enormous win, because think of the reps that you're going to get in technically, tactically, physically, and psychologically in your development versus training really great for 6 months and then being out for 2 months with a shoulder injury, and then training good for 3 months and being out for a month with an elbow injury. And that lack of consistency, it compounds in the wrong direction for you over time. So remaining injury free is of absolute paramount importance. And you can do that, like Shihan said at the start, by dropping the ego and undertraining the physical qualities a lot. Starting so easy. I say to clients all the time, your initial sessions for flexibility training, for some strength training sessions, should be so easy it nearly feels like a waste of time. And I tell them that straight out, because I want them to start really low to get it right technically, so they're exactly what they need to do technically, a Star Wars clone, to use Shihan's words, and then we can build up from there.
And the reality is that it's physical training is not the problem. It's the mental aspect of it, the willingness to train regularly and the willingness to create a habit of training. And that's why you're much better off starting slow and building up. And one thing Mitch says quite often, you may have just said it, is the only training that's worth anything, that's any good, is training that you can actually recover from. That's very important.
It's everything, because if you can't recover from training, that's how you end up injured. That's how you end up burnt out. That's how you end up not being able to sleep and, too wired at night, and then you don't want to go and train the next day. So training's only as good as that which you can recover from.
It's very true. And we do like my instructor Frank used to say, when you're young and healthy, whip the body. So we can train a lot harder and stronger than we think we can, or we give ourselves credit for. The danger is doing it too far out of your comfort zone, so that you threaten injury, you threaten overtraining, and you threaten overuse injuries in your shoulders and your legs and so on. So I think that's very important to remember too, is we're not saying undertrain all the time. We're saying train optimally today so that tomorrow's training is the best can be. And that may mean that you're doing a really solid cardio session, you're going to have to hit it hard. If you want to get your alactic levels, you're going to have to move hard and fast for a short period. If you want to get your psychological preparation to deal with the pain of oxygen debt, which happens in tournaments all the time. You see too many guys are just not used to fighting through that discomfort of oxygen debt and so on.
Lactate, floating around the body.
The lactate burn and so on. So I think it's very important to remember that we're not saying undertrain all the time. We're saying start slow and build up to what is optimal. And another saying which I like is optimal development, optimal growth comes just outside the comfort zone. Too far out, you get injured. Too far in, you're not developing enough.
That's exactly right. And the other thing with all that too, Shihan, is when we talk about training hard, it's kind of like, again, this is another Ian quote, I'm full of them, is he uses a martial arts analogy a lot with people, and he says, you've got to put a white belt on. It doesn't matter if you're an Olympic champion in hockey or whatever the sport is, and you've got there through raw natural talent, but all of a sudden you're getting injured a lot, your body's out of balance, and you don't run as well as you used to. So you may be an Olympic champion or national champion in that, but you've got to put a white belt on when it comes to your physical preparation, your strength training, your speed training, your flexibility training, those kinds of things. And start at a white belt, build it up the same as we do in a dojo. We don't expect an enormous amount from white belts in the dojo. Hardest belt to get in all martial arts probably is a white belt to actually go and start. And then build up over time. And if you're consistent with your training and you build enough reps and enough capacity in your body, then of course you can spend a lot more time at higher intensities of training because you've done the work to get there. But we can't shortcut that. And I see that happen so much with so many different people.
And psychologically too, we're often faced with what is often called dry periods. Periods, it can be weeks, months, even years, where you just don't seem to be getting a breakthrough. You just don't seem to be getting any growth. You just don't seem to be improving at all. But the reality is it's like this, you've got an upward growth and then you have a plateau. And it's during this plateau that everyone quits. Everyone gets despondent. Everyone feels like they're not making progress. But the reality is, to get from this upward trajectory to the next upward trajectory, you have to transverse that plateau. So that's where it's really important to recognize that the deepest, most valuable training often shows no results on the surface in particular. It goes much deeper than that. Solsai had a nice quote for that, didn't he? In the Kyokushin
In the Kyokushin way, he said, it's as a result of a long course of uneventful, unspectacular training, end of quote. And there's a lot of depth in that. When I read it, I thought, wow, it's Solsai, right? But a long course of uneventful, unspectacular training. It doesn't sound very sexy to people, but that's the fundamental. That's developing incredible fundamentals, I imagine.
There's a great story of the Chinese, a particular strain of Chinese bamboo. You plant the seed and water it and water it and water it for a whole year and nothing happens. Second year, water it, water it, water it. Still nothing seems to happen. Third year, you keep watering this plant seed that you've put in the ground. Still nothing happens. 4 years later, you're still watering it. Nothing happens. And finally, after 5 years, that plant starts to grow at the rate of about 5 meters a week.
Wow.
It just shoots up. Now, to be able to do that under the surface for those 5 years, it was developing the most incredible network of roots and foundations. And that's such a brilliant analogy for the martial arts, is if you're constantly looking for superficial results and, pats on the back and all this, there's something missing. But if you just get your regular, consistent training over a long period of time, as Solsai says, create the long course of uneventful, unspectacular training. That's how you transverse those plateaus. So the next thing you know, whoosh, you're shooting up 5 meters a week like that Chinese bamboo. I think it's very, very important to think in those terms.
I think I'm slow Chinese bamboo. I think I'm still waiting to shoot up.
Yeah, exactly. Let's have a look at a few of these comments. Running's good. Good on you, Dave. It is a good form of meditation. In fact, I can remember times when I had a couple of jobs that were very, very psychologically challenging, stressful. I can recall coming home sometimes at midnight and I just put my shoes on and just go for a run. So I think it's a form of moving meditation. There's no doubt about it. It burns up the energy well. Just out of nowhere, very interesting. I started to keep track of my training a little 2 years ago, and that way I know how much Kyokushin I did, grappling I did, and also weight. Very good. Seriously, without a record, you have no plan. I tend to believe
you're flying blind.
Yeah, that's really true. During the space race, I love this, Marco. Space race, US spent $1 million creating a pen that could work in zero gravity. The Russians used a pencil. I mean, how good is that? How good is that? It's true. Sometimes the most simplistic way works the best. Yeah, you don't. I've fallen victim to that myself in the past, where to me creating the plan for a while there was more important than actual training itself. And then one day you realize, dude, if I just spent the amount of time I'm spending on this plan, just get out there and do something. It doesn't really matter. So yeah, geez. Good, Ryan. Skia lawyer. Good on you, Ryan. He's you always come up with a very nice, friendly comment. Appreciate that. I've been thinking of what Mitch said all week about opportunity cost with exercise. What a profound concept for both martial arts and fitness. Opportunity cost.
Yeah. That's it.
Remind us.
So opportunity cost is when you're choosing to do one thing, that one thing, whatever it is in training this session today, you're choosing by default not to do everything else that you know. So there's opportunity cost in that. And it may seem counterproductive to what Shihan just said, just get in there and train. So the level one of it is, if you're not doing any training, just get in there and train and build consistency. That's the foundation. But after you've got that habit, what Professor Ryan's referring to is thinking about the training you're doing. If I had 6 hours to cut down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 sharpening my axe. I think that's an Abraham Lincoln quote, or at least he gets quoted with it. And again, that's not procrastination, thinking of a plan. That's planning out something quickly, going, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and cover all my bases, because there's an enormous opportunity cost by doing what we're doing. So we've got to make sure what we're doing is like Star Wars clone, is very high quality, is going to get us where we want to go.
That's the key for opportunity, for the cost of it, is to make sure that the quality of training is optimal. Everything comes at a cost. And, this opportunity cost means that you have to be very clear about the quality of your training. Otherwise, it's a cost that's too expensive. It's just,
absolutely, yeah.
It's not worth it. That's true. I think many times, Sensei Mike, thanks for coming again. I think many times people get in their own way. They see the results they want in others, but miss the things they need to do themselves to achieve them, not just in karate. What's the primary problem with that?
It's brilliant.
Yeah, it is. What's the primary cause of that?
Procrastination.
Looking at others.
Comparison is the thief of all joy.
That's right. Don't compare yourself to others. Look, at my age, my shape, my experience, everything that happens to me in the dojo or on the mat is going to be completely different to that guy over there who's 40 years younger, 30 kilograms of muscle stronger, 6 inches. His experience, my experience, his outcomes, my outcomes, Mitch's, are always going to be different. The only reason you look at other people is to learn from them. You don't look at other people to compare. There's no point in comparing. You can learn, and the reason I learn a lot from other people is I see things that I don't want to do. I don't see something I think, I'm not doing that. Damn, my training's lacking. What I'll do sometimes, I'll see someone do something and go, I'm not going to do that. Okay, you can learn a lot from other people's mistakes as well. Shihan, could you break down the multifaceted principle of expansion and contraction of the body? I can do that. It will take some time. But let me just briefly cover it, Ryan. Soulsai has what's called Soulsai's three principles: timing of technique, breath control, and the tempo of technique, breath control, and power points of power stress, which is chikara no kyojaku. In Japanese, kyojaku means strong and weak. Chikara no kyojaku, applying strength, sometimes strong, sometimes weak. Breath control, and waza no kankyu, the timing of technique. Now, if you look back at Funakoshi Gichin and the early days, he didn't have breath control. Iki no chosei in Japanese. Iki no chosei, he didn't have that. What he had was expansion and contraction of the body. Now, if you think about that, another way to see the expansion and contraction of the body is using the spinal chain with scapular retraction and learning how to use the body optimally. It's very closely related to breath control. So I think the reason Soulsai chose to say breath control rather than expansion and contraction of the body is it's a far more simplistic way to understand the importance of that. So expansion and contraction of the body. As a BJJ black belt, you will know very well that, for example, sometimes I need to ball up, close my underhooks, protect my neck to defend. Other times I need to expand and go long and create length and space. So another way to look at it, expansion and contraction, is space and no space. It's also protection and opening when you open up. Also when you're going offensively, the expansion and contraction creates a stretch shorten cycle literally through the spine and shoulders as well. So you have this expansion and contraction. So sometimes, for example, let's say I'm here and I'm pushing down on Mitch's arm. If I'm just doing it with arm on arm, I have no movement. It's just who has the stronger arm. But if I change that to expanding my whole body. So now I'm using the contraction of the spine. Another really good example of that, Ryan, is the move in Sanshin Kata. So I'm here. We have a move. Well, I'm just going to drop it down a little bit so you can see. We have a move where we come across the body and turn there. Now I see some people, they'll go from here. Watch this hand. They'll go from here and move it across the body. Okay. Now, if Mitch was to grab my hand there and I move it off my body, I have zero chance of being able to use the body to move my arm. Expansion, contraction of the body. Look, I expand. Now he grabs my hand, and now I contract and use the whole body. So it's a really good question, Ryan, and it deserves a whole session in itself, which we may do. But the concept of expansion and contraction simply is one way to describe optimizing leverage through the body. When you expand the body, if I move my arm, if I expand the body and move my arm, now it's not just my arm moving, it's the body moving the arm. And leverage, as I describe it, is using more and more of your body against less and less of your opponents. Okay, so you know from your experience that there is a time for contraction when you're covering up, trying to remove space, and a time for expansion when you're trying to create space. I think that's really very profound. Very good question. Ross, Cameron, good. Looking forward to seeing you at the Benny the Jet seminar. For those who don't know, Benny the Jet is coming to Queensland. I think off the top of my head, Ross, it's 18th of October. It's going to be at Ross Cameron's gym in Brisbane at the Ballymore Fitness Centre. And Ross is hosting Benny the Jet. For those who have heard me speak glowingly about Benny many, many times, I think I trained with him for the first time. I know, it must have been in the early 80s, because in my fight career, I used a number of his principles that I learned from him in the last few years of my fight career. But anyway, not only is he an amazing martial artist, he's a fantastic guy, and I'm really looking forward to catching up with Ross as well as catching up with Sensei Benny. Chris, Roots, not too sure where we're going.
Probably that was a Chinese bamboo analogy.
Oh, yes, the roots there. You picked it up even before I finished the story. Exactly. Nothing happens on the surface. That's why in Japanese they have ura omote, ura omote. Omote is what you see on the surface. Ura is what's hidden underneath. And that's another way of looking at Kaisei no Genri, the compartmentalization, breakdown, bunkai of kata too. There's a whole lot going on underneath. Another analogy I like to use is when you see the graceful movements of the swan across the water. And underneath the water, his legs are going like crazy, to get that forward motion. But on top is just very, very graceful. It's a little bit like that. I think my biggest issue has been to not set short-term, easily achievable goals versus long-term, more challenging goals. I realize I need to have that regular sense of achievement. Everyone's different, and I think that's really important, Mark. And that's why, as Mitch was saying, set underwhelming short-term goals until you create the regular habit. It takes maybe 3 or 4 weeks to create a good, solid habit of daily discipline, but it only takes 3 or 4 days to break it. So you've got to develop that habit very, very early. And one way to do that is just start off. I always say that the shortest training session you can ever do is a single breath. And if you get up and do nothing more than get out of bed, sit on the side of the bed, close your eyes and do one single breath, you have begun the process of establishing a good habit. And that's all it takes. It's like when we do a deck of cards. You do a full deck of cards, the way we work it, you end up doing 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, 100 burpees. But you start off with 2 or 3 cards, whatever it takes. And then you just add 1 card a day or even 1 card a week. And you build up over time, and you allow your body the opportunity to develop the ability to do all of that without fatiguing. Remember, as Mitch says, the only training is training. The only training worthwhile is training you can actually recover from.
Just on that, Shihan, people underappreciate compounding because the early stages of it are so boring and you can't really see them. But long term, the back end's enormous. And think about it with a deck of cards. Imagine just every day you did 1 push-up, 1 sit-up, 1 squat, 1 burpee. We could all do that in under a minute a day. I mean, 30 seconds, if that, right? And you think, oh, that's nothing. That's not going to do much. Okay. After 365 days, you've done 365 push-ups, sit-ups, squats, and burpees. Go and do all that in one session today, right now, and see how you go. It's going to break down most people. They couldn't do it, right? But throughout the year, you've done that. And you might think, oh, that's nothing. But it's actually something when you add it up at the end. And that's the underwhelming part of compounding. The beginning of compounding, your training, always seems incredibly boring. But the end result is greater than the sum of the parts.
Yep. No one can eat an elephant in one sitting, but you can always eat an elephant a mouthful at a time. You think about the volume of food you eat every year and try and sit down and eat it all at once. It's impossible. And it's the same with training. It's very much the same with training. Goju Ryu, Quinn Sensei, good day, and may your day be blessed with the spirit of Buddha and yours, indeed. Where are you from? Let us know where you're from. That'd be great. Appreciate your words. Tora ko puko, Kyokushin karate, os seishin hitsyo. Okay, so that's kind of like a Japanese, Kyokushin karate. The spirit of perseverance is vital. That's what that says.
Beautiful.
And it's very, very true. A good training should have 2 columns. First column, plan, and second column, what you did. And by the way, I figured it was you, Dave, because you know how I knew it was you, Dave? I'm thinking it was you. Someone said up the top that running is a good form of meditation. I've got to tell a story about Dave. Dave Hughes trained with us in Brisbane for a couple of years at the Margaret Street Dojo. And many years later, I was doing a fair bit of running, and I was never a runner. At high school, I was a sprinter, but never a runner. I wasn't a good runner, but I ran consistently and regularly. And Dave came round and he was laying a slab at my house at Marika Way in Kochonda. And then I was going off for a run. And so one day he said, can I come for a run with you? I've told you this story. Yeah. And Dave is a runner. Dave is a fit, athletic runner. And I'm not. But I was running. And I think on that day, do you remember how far we ran? I've got a feeling we ran down to Crystal Caves and back, which must have been a total of about 16 Ks, I think. And the whole way, Dave is like, we're running at a pace that was so comfortable for Dave, but for me, it was murderous. And I'm just like, talk about the the talk test.
Yeah.
When you're running.
You're above it.
Yeah. Can you have a conversation? Dave was running in the talk test zone. I'm running way above it. And so anyway, 16K, you're right. It was a 16K run. And it was a great run, by the way, beautiful run up the valley and back. I was running it most days then, but I was running it a lot slower than Dave. And Dave came along and put the pressure on, and away we went. And I'm just like, it was everything I could do just to keep up with Dave. It was a lot of fun, Dave. And it was, I really appreciate you coming along to these sessions too. I knew it was you from when you said last week, talking about the Friday nights at the Margaret Street Dojo.
Yes.
They were really great sessions. Good. Yes, good. Good. Tora ko puko. That's right. Challenge yourself in training. Very good. Nasser Baha Omran. Awesome. Kuwait. Ross. Yep, that is so. 18th of October, Saturday, 18th of October in Brisbane. I think that's going to be a hell of a session with Benny the Jet. Mitch, do you recommend heart rate training to develop that type of consistency? Heart rate training, do you mean monitoring the heart with a heart rate monitor perhaps? Not
necessarily. I mean, we've got all these devices and technology today that allow a lot of monitoring of things, and I'm certainly not against any of it, but I'm far more leaning towards just doing the training. And it doesn't have to be super hard. Shihan just mentioned the talk test, which I think is one of the greatest ways to train. If you can train like you're doing exercise and you can comfortably talk to someone, you blow an aerobic threshold. You're comfortably in what they might call zone 2 cardio type today. If you're above it, you can't talk while you're training, or you can just do a few sentences here and there and breathe. You're probably right at anaerobic threshold. And if you can't talk, you're above anaerobic threshold. But with all that said, for consistency in training and building the habit, I'm all for low intensity type training, and not even specific fitness type training, Ross. I'm more like, for martial artists, do skills training, do your Kihon, do your kata, do your Aido Kihon, do your basic conditioning, do the techniques of the martial art. And that's the form of training, because you're developing the skill requirements, the technical requirements, and you're also developing the specific physical capacity required.
I don't know if you were here last week, Ross, but we did talk about conditioning, and in that we talked about specificity a lot more. But
Endurance,
endurance and heart rate monitors, I think are unbelievably good if the exercise you're doing requires consistent, repetitious training, so that you want to take your heart rate. Arguably, I used to work the idea of 1 or 2 beats below your anaerobic threshold, because when you actually cross that anaerobic threshold, then you're going into oxygen debt. And if you've got to run a 16K run, this is what was happening when I ran with Dave. He's running way below his anaerobic threshold, and I'm way above my anaerobic threshold. I think, and I always used to use a heart rate monitor when I was running, preparing for marathons, and when I was doing long bike rides. So those 2 times, they're the times I use a heart rate monitor. Is the other time I see a heart rate monitor is when simply you want to check out at what level your heart rate is when you're doing a certain type of training. So you could be rolling, for example. You could do a few 6-10 minute rolls in a row, and you want to see how you're going in terms of your heart rate threshold. Well, then having a monitor on can check that, but that's not going to help your training. That'll just give you a bit of feedback
on it, and also monitoring recovery between rounds, how quick you go down heart rate wise, all that kind of thing. But I do think, if I'm quite frank about things, I think we've over technologized, if that's a word, too much technology.
But it is now.
Yeah, in training. I think there's too many people now. Like, I've got friends who don't train near enough at all, and they've got all the heart rate, the Apple Watches. They track everything, and I kind of laugh. I just go, you guys need to train way more than track. And I think we've gone down that road a little too much for the average recreational person. But if you really want to improve your performance, absolutely, Ross, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Quinn Sensei, I did not know you studied BJJ Brothers and Budo. Urs, thank you very much. I trained with Hickson and Machado Jiu-Jitsu after Hoxon, Gracie passed away. I never trained with the Gracies, Hickson, but one of my first, I had one or 2 sessions here in just with people, and then I started to fly to LA very regularly, like maybe twice a month or even 3 times a month. And I was whilst I was there, my first session was with Carlos Machado. He was teaching with Hegan down at Redondo Beach Dojo there. That was before Carlos moved to Texas, and before Hegan moved his school. But there was a tiny little school in just next to the Lucky's car park right at Redondo Beach, next to Gold's Gym, and that's where I started to train. And my own long-term teacher, John Donahue, not Danaher, Donahue. He was a purple belt then, and he'd gone to America. He lived in America for 10 years, got his black belt with Gene LaBelle, as well as the Machado brothers. And on that first day of training with the Machados, there he was. And we hooked up again after having connected through Bill Wallace and the Bill Wallace seminar a few years earlier. But anyway, yes, good on you. I think it's a great combination. Ryan, Shihan, can you break down Go-no-sen, Sen-no-sen, and Tai-no-sen? These seem to have different definitions, karate versus judo and the art forms. Well, it's funny you say that, because I have Musashi's book here, and it's Musashi that describes the Go-no-sen, Sen-no-sen, and Tai-no-sen. Basically, off the top of my head, and I must admit that I'd have to study it, but basically what you're talking about there is preemptive counters, counter-fighting counters, and simultaneous counters. So sometimes it may be sen-no-sen. You're going to correct me, I'm sure. I don't mind being wrong. But off the top of my head, sen-no-sen is where you're actually preemptively striking. Go-no-sen is where you're counter-striking, and Tai-no-sen is where you're simultaneously attacking. So they're all Japanese phrases to describe universal concepts, put it that way. Preemptive striking, counter-striking, and simultaneous striking. I could probably go into a lot more about that, but I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I'd probably need to do a little research, because it's been a while. I'm actually rewriting, I'm doing a new translation of the Book of Five Rings. Not that I think this is wrong, but I am inspired by this. And one of the things that I did find in it, I got inspired to do a new translation for martial artists based on the translation of one single word in here, which I found very interesting. So anyway, more of that on another day. Awesome. I love the video. Good on you, Dave. And it's always nice that you come. Tell Benny Okades hello from me. Missing, yep, Sensei Richard, another brother. Yes, we're very sad to lose Sensei Richard Norton. We also lost Bryson Keenan, another good friend recently. I'll say hello from you, but I don't know your name. So you could PM me later if you like. And by all means, I'll say good day to Benny for you. I have a wonderful story of Benny and his kindness to my parents too. Always thank you for time, guys. Appreciate your time too, Ryan, coming along. As ever, great session. Thank you again. Kumite 360. That sounds like Paddy Pinto. Okay. Well, Shihan and Sensei Mitch, great episode topic. Also great to catch up on the weekend, Mitch. Yeah, I heard Mitch went. Yeah, not jealous at all.
I got to meet Sensei Pat Pinto down in Victoria on the weekend. It was really good to catch up and press the flesh.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for the invite.
No,
you'll be the next one, Shihan. Yeah, don't worry about it. So anyway. We have our national camp coming up in a few weeks too. And if you'd like to join us for 3 days of great training, we'll be covering all 5 ranges, but it is Kyokushin centered. So we're going to be doing some fantastic training, including some very special guests coming along to take some sessions. So by all means, everyone's welcome. Agree. Data is good for the planning. Yes, that's right. That's going back to the heart rate monitor. That's true too.
Absolutely,
yeah. If you have that feedback data, you can look at it and go. If nothing else, you can go. I didn't train anywhere near as hard as I thought I was.
Yeah.
So you could realize that was Ross. Yep. Mujo movement and wellness. I just woke up on this side of the world. I will have watched from start.
I wonder if that's Joachim.
It is. That's Joachim. Yeah, all the way over. Good to see you over in
Portugal.
Portugal. That's right. Good. Look forward to that book. Oh yeah, good on you. I recently saw a video of a judo coral belt breakdown Gono-sen, Sen-no-sen, and Tai-no-sen in judo terms, and it really added great depth to these concepts. You should add a link. I'd love to see that. But again, I think Ryan and look. If you sent me that link, I would watch it and I'd love it. I have no doubt about it. But also we need to remember that your own training and your own experiences really, really count. And if you have a fundamental concept of Gono-sen, Sen-no-sen, and Tai-no-sen, you can then apply that in your own way and experiment with it. And particularly now that you've seen that judo master explain it, you can apply that in your own training and you will all of a sudden just come up with your own understanding in a very, very deep way. Depth. Yes. I am from the Hawaiian Goju group under Masaichi Oshiro Sensei and Rodney Who's Shihan. Can you tell me about Sosei Oyama visits to Hawaii in the 1950s, 60s? Do you know the Bobby Lowe connection? Well, I had a very close connection to Bobby Lowe. We first met in 1976 and we maintained a very close relationship in fact, look at this. This book is gifted to me by Bobby Lowe Shihan. So, yep. And I've had a lot of stories, very personal stories from Shihan Bobby Lowe about his experiences with Masayama. Fantastic stories. Some I've related to in my own book, The Budo Karate Masayama. And I spoke very dearly about Bobby Lowe, who, as you may know, wrote the foreword to my book, both the 1987 version, the 1987 version of the book. Great man, a genuine example of a real Budoka. So there you have it. All right, guys, great session. Thank you very much for your participation. We've gone over time. I try to keep them down to 15, 20 minutes, and we've gone 45 minutes. But great questions. Appreciate it very much. Thanks for coming along, guys. And if you're not a subscriber, tap the other guy on the shoulder. There's 2 of you out there who aren't subscribers, but please, by all means, subscribe. If you are a subscriber, by all means, pass the word around. Just say, check these guys out. One's bald and one's old, and they don't know what they're talking about, but they're kind of funny. Okay? Get the word out. We love that because that helps us indeed. Thank you very much, everyone. And Ross, yes, look forward to seeing you on the 18th of October. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.